Okay, so today we will start with user ID. Okay. Rakesh, any questions from the last class? Any doubt? Any confusion? The thing we did?
Uh, Things are clear till now, Neeraj. No issues. You can go ahead.
Sunita, from your side, any questions in the Palo Alto? Anything?
No, sir, nothing as of now.
Great, awesome. So today we'll start the user ID, right? Now, what is user ID concept basically? Let's say even after applying everything, all the security, right? What are the things over there? Let's say a user, two users are there, let's assume, right? And what we have done, we have restricted the information or the internet access and multiple things, right? For a specific IP, let's say, or for a specific domain. Now, let's assume if the users will get to know a specific IP, a very specific IP is allowed to do everything, right? Is allowed to do everything, right? That is, we can say on the firewall, there is a special policy for a specific IP to access the internet, right? So what the users can do, users can change the IP address and then they can communicate, right? Let's assume the policy we created, right? So that is for the series from 10.1 to 10.100, let's say, right? And for the rest users, these are available. If they you get to know, right? So what they will do, they will configure the IP after that .100, right? And then they will be able to access the internet, right? Or we can say they will be able to access any of the website, correct? These issues we can see in the network, right? So what we do to resolve these issues, right? If we can have these such issues, right, in the network, like they can change the IP address and can access the things, right? Then we can implement user ID password. It means whenever now the user, let's say I have implemented this information, right? And in the policy, there was a stuff like whenever any user from the 10th range will access the information, right? Let's say 10.1.1.1 to 10.1.1.100. Those will be denied, mostly denied, just they can access the infra, right? But 10.1.1.100 to 10.1.1.110 are really allowed and they can download, upload anything. If these users get to know, they can change the information, they can change the IP address, right? So what we can do now, we can implement this user ID concept for all the policies. Now what will happen over there? Whenever any of these users now, whenever this user or any of these users will try to access internet, right? They will first of all get a web page where the users need to put a username password. Okay? So if those users are really these users, they will have those username password to go outside, right? If these users are changing the IP to these IPs to access internet, right? They will get a prompt for the username password and they have to put it. Otherwise, they cannot go outside. So what we are doing here, we are putting one extra layer level security, right? You got the point? What we are doing here now? Now we
Yeah,
are
got it.
one extra layer security in the network that whenever any user will communicate now, that doesn't matter what IP they are taking, right? They have to pass this user ID concept, right? So what you can do, you can implement this concept, right? And you can integrate the first option. You can use self-memory. When we say self-memory, it means local database. Okay, like I will create some local database username, password, the user can use it, right? Second, I can integrate Radius server. I can integrate, let's say my company is having a TechX server, right? Let's say my company is having AAA server. Let's say my company is having LDAP server, right? So if my company is owning any of these server, right? So what we can do, we can also integrate those servers, and then whenever any user will try to communicate, they will first of all authenticate via those servers if we are holding those servers, or via the self-memory username password. And then if they says yes, the user is verified, then they can access and they can go further to access next stuff. Okay, so I'll show you like how to configure self-memory and how to integrate any of these servers. Okay, now when we go for these servers, it means the other networking team or other security team will basically have these servers ready, right? They will provide you the server IP, right? And the other required details if these are mandate. Okay, any of these details, if let's say Radius server use 3 or 4 different parameters, so that the other team will provide you these parameters. What do you need to do over there? You just need to integrate those server. That's it. Okay. So if the concept is clear, then we can move to the lab part, right? Tell me, any confusion, any doubt in this concept?
No, I think there is this Takas LDAP we can use, but radius I think is a different thing. That is for generally for wireless authentication.
Okay, we can verify. I'll show you basically over there. Okay. Like in the like once we configure these things, right, the authentication method, so that I'll show you like how many options are available over there. I might be wrong right, about the radius, but yeah, I'll show you the few available stuff over there that we can use. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. Sunita, anything from your side?
No, sir.
Okay, great. So let's enable. I'll turn on this firewall. So the very first thing, what I will do here, I will show you the user account configuration. It means, first of all, we need to configure the user local database, right? So here, if I choose the self memory, right, it means I need to configure local database. If I choose any of these server, it means this step I can skip. Okay. So if I use any of the other server, right? So this first step I can skip. Okay. Otherwise, I have to go to this step and I have to configure the few users over there. Okay. So start. This is available. Just few more seconds. Okay. Username and password, admin. I'll just make sure this user access the internet. Okay. It is trying to get the IP address. So just go here, try to access it. I think one of the interface is not configured. Yeah, right. So I'll just quickly configure this interface. This is towards LAN.
Progress.
Right. Inheritance source, this one gateway is 20.20.20.1. Primary DNS inherited by this interface. Okay. Policy is there. It's policy. So I'll just remove the previous policy that one we use like for different things. Okay. I'll be using only the internet one. Yeah. Commit. Say okay. So once this will get committed, right? So the user should get the IP address from the DHCP and that should be able to access the internet, right? Even the net. Okay. So we see the issue. Specify DSP start IP is this one, is not the, oh, okay. So that is saying the object we are using, right? That object is containing a different range. So yes, that is a wrong thing then, right? So the DHCP I have to modify 192.168.168.10 to 192.168.168.20. Okay, even the gateway, I'll just verify once again. 168, fine. I need to change the gateway also. 192.168.168.1. Yes, say okay. And I'll just say commit, right? So you see the benefit of having this commit, right? So we get the error also over there. So we can easily figure out what is the issue. Perfect. Now the users should start getting the IP address. So I'll just do a rerun here. I'll disable, I'll enable. Perfect. Perfect. We are able to access internet, right? Now, the very first thing. So to configure the user ID stuff, right? The very first thing you need to configure the local user database that we need to configure. Okay. So let's go here, go to device, local user database, and go to users, create a new user. So let's say, I'll say Neeraj, password, Neeraj. Okay. Let's say I'll configure one more. Let's say this is CNC training. CNC training. See, okay. So this is how you can configure multiple database here, right? Or you can also create a group. Let's say you do have 3 or 4 groups. Now you don't want to call one by one all the users, right? What you can do, you can group these users, add a group. Let's say that is for the CNC. How many users? User number 1, user number 2, and just say okay. It means what will happen here? You are not doing something new here. What you are doing here, you are just doing a grouping of the previous users. Let's say you do have 10 list here, 10 or 20 different users, right? Now what you want to do here, you want to categorize those users. Let's say if you are the sales user, if you are the admin, if you are the HR users, right? So you can basically categorize those things here. That's it, right? Nothing new, just categorization here we are doing. So this was the very first thing that we need to configure. So I can note down here the steps also. So to create this one, go to device, user database, local user database. Then users. And inside that you can add, right? And to do the grouping, same device, local user database, and then user group. And then you can add and you can choose your users and you can save it later, right? Okay, so this was the first step, right? Now, the users we created, right? Second task, what we need to do here, we need to configure an authentication profile that we will use to attach it, right? So second step is we need to configure authentication profile. Okay, so second, if let's say I'll go for user account, the local user account, right? Or if I go for other servers, let's say I'm using the TechX server, LDAP server, right? So I need to go actually to second step this one. In both ways, I have to go here and have to use those stuff. Okay, so let's go here, scroll up. You see here authentication profile, right? Click here. So under device, we have authentication profile. So I'll just note down the steps one by one. So go to device, then authentication profile. Okay. Then you need to create, you need to add. So I'll say add. Name, so let's say I'll say CNC authentication. Now, the type that is asking which type of method you want to use here. So I will say here, local database, you see Radius, LDAP, TechX, SML, Kerberos, any of these servers you can integrate. Let's say if I'll choose local database, so it will take those database, basically the one we created. Okay. If I choose here Radius, so I need to create a profile first. It means on the fly also I can configure this. I right now I don't have that profile, right? So what I can do here, I can, you see, in the left hand side, server profile. If you want to configure the profile first at the very first step instead of local user account, right? You can go there and you can configure that step. And if you forget, right? So on the fly, you can configure the step. So just click here, Radius server or whatever thing you choose, right? Give it a name, some information, more information here. Then we have to add the server name, server IP address, server secret key, and the port number you use. So 1812 is a by default port number that they use for the Radius. Okay. So this is how you need to provide the information. And you can integrate any of other server also. Let's say LDAP. Again, for the LDAP, I have to create a profile, right? And this is the way that you can use. Okay. So Rakesh, this is clear to you?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, great. So choose local database right now, use a domain, and these things you can skip right now. Okay. Factors, yeah, skip right now. Advanced. So now we can choose the allow list from the local database. Add. You see, I'm getting here CNC training, and the Neeraj, right? So this is a group. You see a single user icon. That's single user. And that's a group. Or I can choose all also, right? So that's a group. This group contains these both users, right? So let's say I'll say right now all. It means all the users. That is fine. Okay. And now you see here account lockout, right? So I can see here account lockout. So failed attempts, right? And lockout attempt. So I can say here if I see the, let's say, 3 fail attempts. So lockout the dashboard or the user interface for another 10 minutes. Okay. So this parameter I can choose. If I specify 00, it means this is not enabled. Once I choose any specific number here, that will be enabled, right? If I choose 00, it means that is disabled. I am not using the account lockout feature. Okay. Is that clear?
What exactly will happen if you will configure account
Yeah,
lockout?
I'll show you. Let's say I'll say here failed attempt 3. So if the user will do a 3 failed attempt, right? The wrong username password 3 times, right? So then the dashboard of the user will be locked out for another 10 minutes or whatever time I will put here in the minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll say okay now. So this is created. So from here, I can choose local database from the very first tab, right? From the third tab, this you can skip. From the third tab, you have to choose the allow list. And from the same tab, you can go for lockout stuff. And then you can save it, right? So this is the way to configure one authentication profile. Any questions, any doubt till this point? All good?
No, it's fine.
Okay. The third step. Now we need to configure the captive portal. Okay. Again, under device, you see the user identification. So this user identification is basically your captive portal stuff. Okay. So click here, user identification. You will see multiple options here, right? You have to go for the captive portal settings. Click here. So I'll just note down the steps one by one. So it will be good for you. For this configuration, device, user identification, and then you have to go for the captive portal settings. Added this one. First of all, enable captive portal. Yes, enable, that is fine, right? Now, So what to choose here? First of all, that is saying idle timer, right? So it means if your user, let's say if your user is using your user ID concept, right, and it is fine, right? It is using. After how many minutes? Let's say if the user is idle for 10 minutes. Guys, give me a minute. I'm getting a call. Okay, I'm back. Let me check why the error is. Just give me a minute. You guys just need 2 or 3 minutes, right? And the server is restarting. Okay, so I need to do the configuration again, right? So that was not committed. So only the user configuration, this what we call it, the user ID configuration only, right? So I will quickly configure the user account and the authentication profile, and we'll move here, okay? And we'll explain those stuff. If you want, you can configure the group, okay, or you can skip it. That is fine. Yeah, so I was explaining here this one, right? So first you need to enable this check, right? That is fine. Now that is saying idle time. right? So if your device is idle, let's say your user is not using anything, right? And the device is idle for next 15 minutes, right? So it will ask again for the same username password, right? And once you log in, right? So if you access the like internet or using that username password, right? You can use this timer basically. So your device or the user can access internet for next 1 hour using those username password. Again, it has to log in to the same portal. Got it? So these are the two different timers that we use. Okay. And that's a default port number. That is fine. Now you have to choose here redirect. Okay. Click on the redirect, right? Now here, what you need to choose here, you need to provide the IP address, like on which IP address your device should redirect, right? So IP of the firewall, it means it will show you a page over there basically, right? So whenever a user will access, right, it will redirect the packet to the interface IP and it will show you a page over there, a portal over there, right? So right now the IP is 192.168.168.1. It means whenever this user will try to access anything, right, it has to show the portal, the user portal, right? So the packet will redirect first of all to this interface, right? It will show the portal, and once that is approved, right, then it will allow the access to the internet. Okay. So I have to give the interface IP, the IP towards LAN, this interface IP. Okay. If you are using some certificate profile also, you can use directly here, right? Otherwise, you can skip it, right? Or a profile here also you can choose. So right now I'm using the authentication profile. Yes, this I have to choose definitely, right? So this is the one we created actually. Okay. And if you're, okay, one more thing. If you are using some SSL TLS profile side, you can call it here. So right now we don't have any such profiles. I'll just leave it blank, right? Rest is fine. Say okay. So I'll just note on the steps. After this one, what you need to take care? You need to take care about the mandate things basically are the authentication profile. Choose the one you created in the second step, right? Then you have to choose your redirect thing. Redirect to the LAN IP. You have to provide LAN IP. Okay, this you need to do. That's it, right? This is done. Next thing, you need to basically enable the response page and the user ID concept, right? So I'll go to the interface, network, interface management, because this we are using for the LAN interface. And here you need to choose the response page and the user ID. So then only like the user ID will be activated over there. Okay. Say okay. One more thing. So we need to verify what? The fourth step, you need to verify the user ID and response page should be enabled on management interface policy, right? So how you can do that? Network profile, network profile, and then go to interface management. And choose the one you created earlier, right? And then allow those services. Okay. Like your response page and the user ID. One more thing. You need to make sure your zone should be enabled with user ID. Okay, because that LAN interface belongs to a zone, right? Even that should be enabled, right? So go to your network, go to your zone, go to your LAN zone, right? And this user identification, right? That should be enabled over there. That is fine. We are enabled, right? And just say, okay, that is fine. Okay. So how to do that even? Go to network, go to zone, and then check user ID, and then save it. Okay. This was the next step. Any questions so far? Any doubt? Anything? All good? Okay. Now, next, what we need to create here? Now we need to create one authentication. Okay. So go to object. Come here for the authentication, right? Here we need to configure that form basically. So once we configure, like in future, next step, like we'll configure a captive portal, right? So that time we have to choose authentication method. Which authentication method you want to choose, right? So let's create a new one. Okay. Name CNC auth. This is for the captive portal. Okay. I'll say captive. Now that is asking for the method, right? So I'll choose here web form. Okay. So I'll choose here web form. Authentication profile, the one we created actually, right? With those username password, choose that authentication profile. And this message, if you want, you can change. You want to modify, you can modify. Just say okay. So I'll just notify the put the steps here. The sixth is you need to configure authentication for policy. In future, like we'll configure the policy. Which policy? Captive portal policy. Okay. And how to do that? Go to objects, go to authentication at last. And then add it. What you need to put here? You need to give a name. What was the next step? You need to give authentication method. Auth method, that should be web form. Okay. Third, you need to choose your authentication profile. Auth profile, the one we created, right? This auth profile, the second step. Choose your authentication profile, the one you created actually, right? And that's it. Just say okay then. So after this, you can say okay, right? So this, we created a authentication for authentication for basically captive portal policy, right? Now finally we can go and we can configure the policy at last, right? Go to policy, because policy is mandate whenever we use our security profile or whenever we configure decryption policy, right? So we have to come here basically for those things, right? Now you see here authentication, right? This is basically captive portal. If you go for the older version, right, you will see here captive portal name, right? But now this is having authentication name, but this is both are same. If you see captive portal here, or if you see authentication, both name are same. So right now what we are doing here, we are creating captive portal. Click here, add a new, give it a name, CNC captive portal. Source, you need to choose your source zone. I'll get a packet from the LAN. Destination zone, I'll send to WAN. This I'll say any. Action, yeah. Authentication informants, right? So you have to choose your authentication profile that you created earlier on the sixth step. Choose here CNC auth captive. This we created, right? Authentication captive portal, right? Click here and just say okay. That's it, right? So I'll just note on the steps for this also. So seventh, you need to configure finally this captive portal settings. Okay, not settings, basically setting we enabled earlier. This is policy. Okay, so how to do that? Policy, authentication, policy, authentication. Then you need to add a new one. Inside that, you need to put a name. You need to choose source zone, destination zone, and what was there? Your authentication, enforcement. This we created at sixth step, this one, right? I'll say here, sixth step configuration. Source zone is a LAN zone. Destination zone is a WAN zone. Give it a valid name. After these things, you can save it. And now I will say commit. Okay. So let me do a commit. Commit. Almost done. Okay. Great. So I'll go to my user and will try to access the internet. Okay. Open a browser. Say www.networkingclasses.com. Let's verify what is the issue. Security policy is there. Netting is also there. Source LAN destination service URL. Action CNC. That is fine. Even this looks good. 170, 192, 161, This is the address, right? I'll just verify. The gateway is fine. Profile is same. Authentication profile. Local factor nothing. Advanced CNC neither. That is fine. All looks good. I'll just do again commit. Advance. Say unsafe. Yeah, cool. Okay, so now this is a captive portal, right? So the user has to put the username password, right?